Welcome to the Drone Camps YouTube channel. I'm Justin Davis, and this channel, this year, we're celebrating 10 years of drones and FPV reviews, tutorials, and how-tos on this channel. If you reach this channel looking for beginner advice on what drone to buy for the first drone ever, you reached the right spot. We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about our top 3 beginner drones in 2024, which one you should pick up, which one has everything in the box that you might need to pull out and start flying FPV for the first time as the ultimate beginner. So we're going to go through some steps today. We're going to give you some tips. We're going to do some recommendations. We're also going to do a line of sight flight test. That's going to give you an idea of how to pull it out of the box, put everything together, learn how to fly at line of sight first indoors, and then use the FPV goggles second. So we're going to go through all the steps that you need as a beginner in this video with an updated version of beginner FPV drone flying in 2024. Let's go ahead and get started with the first of this series. The drone we're going to use in today's beginner tutorial is the Betafpv Aquila 16 FPV kit. It includes everything inside this box for beginners to learn how to start flying FPV. Inside that box, you get a really nice case with a zipper and everything fits inside. The Aquila 16 drone with inverted propellers and prop guards. Mode 2, 2.4 gigahertz ELRS radio. The FPV goggles with a built-in DVR. And a 2-port LiPo charger which has BT 2.0 connectors which plug into each 1S 1100 milliamp battery. Should get us about 6 to 7 minutes flight time for each battery. And as a recommendation, if you'd like to upgrade your charger to something better, I suggest the VFly Whoop Store 3. This one can charge up to 6 batteries at once, and not only can it charge your batteries, it can also storage charge them, which most 1S chargers do not. The one included in the box only does a standard charge, but not a storage charge. This will allow you to put your batteries away if you're not going to fly them for months on end. It also has a built-in fan and AC and DC inputs. It has a 12-volt barrel port right here and an XT60, as well as a USB-C power input on the side. So super versatile and not a bad price for this one. The first thing we're going to do is charge up our drone battery. So look inside your Aquila 16 FPV kit and pull out your 2-up 2-port battery charger. On one end, it has the BT 2.0 connectors, these little extension cables to be able to get to the battery plug on the battery, as well as the USB-C port on this side. So go ahead and power up your USB port on this side, and now you're ready to charge your batteries for the first time. Take your BT 2.0 connector extension and put it on the flat side down bottom, just like this. Plug that in, and you'll see a red light come up on the charger. Once it goes green, it's a full charge battery and you're ready to fly. Again, you can see there is a flat spot on the bottom of this battery extension cable, and there is one here. You want to match that up when you're plugging it in. Otherwise, you could get something reverse polarity and probably damage the battery or the charger. But it's not likely to happen since this is pretty well protected. Now, when you're pulling these off, a big tip is to grab onto the connector itself. Never pull on the wire on any type of drone battery, leads or the battery itself. You can damage the wire and the connection. Next up, go ahead and grab your radio. On the very bottom of it, there's a USB-C port. Take your USB cable and plug it in there. You will see that it's charging by a little LED on the power button. It should turn red and show you that it is indeed charging. The next step is charging our FPV goggles. There is a USB-C port on the side here, as well as the power button which turns them on and off. And over on this side, we have a DVR slot for an SD card. So you can put a micro SD card here to record your videos. The record button is right here on the right-hand side of the goggles in the very back. This is the search menu function here for finding the right FPV channel on your 5.8 gigahertz bands. On the side, we're going to go ahead and plug in the USB-C port, and you'll see a blue light up, and it should take about 45 minutes to charge up the internal battery in the FPV goggles. The charger that comes with this kit is not just a charger, it's also a battery checker. So if you unplug a USB-C cable here and you take your lead, plug it into the side where it says test right here on this left side port. Once you plug it into a battery, it has a little bit of magic that happens, and once you plug it in, it will show you that your battery is fully charged. It gives you the battery voltage on there, and typically a battery is about 4.2 volt on a full charge. So congratulations and pat yourself on the back. At this point in the video, you've charged up your radio, both of your batteries, and your FPV goggles, and we're ready to take our first FPV flights. but not so fast. We're gonna jump into a tutorial now. It's called a line of sight flight test. You wanna always line of sight flight test any FPV drone that you're flying for the first time to make sure that everything goes right. When you get up into the 5-inch category and the 6 and 7-inch category, things can go catastrophically wrong if you have a propeller on backwards, one of the motors are running the wrong direction, and there's a ton of different reasons why a drone can fly across the ground and crash. So very important that you always fly at line of sight. That means without the goggles first, and then goggle up afterwards. So we'll go through a line of sight tutorial, we'll do some circuits together, and then we'll goggle up and do some FPV as well in step 2. Now we're going to show you in this part of the video how to turn everything on and get everything working properly for your first flight before we fly line of sight. So the first thing we typically do is turn on the RC radio, push this power button once and push it again and hold, and that will power it up, very similar to a DJI transmitter. Next thing we're going to do is take the drone battery itself, starting from the back of the drone, we're going to slide it forward, and there's a locking mechanism that happens, and you'll see the blue lights light up. They'll start to flash while they're making a connection to the drone, and once they stop flashing, they've made a solid connection. One tip, when you turn on this radio, make sure all these tiny switches are facing away from you in the away from you position, because they will do things unexpectedly, and you might be in the wrong mode, or you might power up the drone on accident. So make sure those switches are faced all the way away from you. The next thing you can do after your line of sight flight test is turn on your FPV goggles on the side right here, flip that switch, and you will see the goggles turn on, and then you'll see the live view for your FPV camera inside your drone. Once your battery gets low, you'll see these lights start to blink and let you know that it does have a low battery status. Go ahead and push your battery from the front to the back, and this will unplug this battery from the drone, and now you can put it back on the charger for the next charge. One more thing you might want to buy if you haven't bought it already is a landing pad. This probably is the most useful item that you will ever have as a drone pilot. Starting as a beginner all the way through professionals use these to take off and land, and make sure that your drone's not landing in sand or sediment. I've landed in some areas out in the desert where there was a high contrast of iron in the sand, and the sand immediately sticks to the motors. These motors do have magnets in them, so depending on where you live around the country, if there's a high iron content in the sand, you'll have a ton of iron sticking all over your brushless motors, and it is not fun to get off. So make sure you fly on and off of a nice landing pad. This one folds up nicely, and I keep it in my car at all times. The first thing we want to do is find a good space to fly in, and fortunately for you, you can fly this quadcopter in a very small space. And before you start flying your Aquila 16, it's important to become familiar with the transmitter. Before you start this up, make sure all of your switches are facing away from you and you have read the manual to know what each switch does. We're going to walk you through that real quick. To turn on the drone's transmitter, you press once, press again, and hold for about 2 seconds. You'll hear it beep. See a red LED and then a blue LED, and this is a mode 2 transmitter for North American standard. Up, down is the throttle on the left hand side, left and right is your yaw, that turns the drone left and right. Also on the right side we have the roll option right here, which makes the drone go left and right, and forward and back. This is the pitch option, and on the bottom we have the charge port. On the back of this transmitter, we have the setup button and a bind button. Should your quadcopter become disconnected from the radio, you can rebind it to the ELRS radio. Now on the top, we've labeled the switches for you so you know what everything is. And again, all these switches should start out facing away from you in that position. SA switch is the arm and disarm switch. So press this up towards you and that will arm the drone. Press it away and it'll disarm it. This is the mode switch. It is a 3-position switch, and we have normal, sport mode, and manual mode. Manual mode simply takes away all of the stabilization and lets you fly what we call acro, which is cool. And if you want to switch channels, the VTX switch right here will switch channels. In case you have someone on the same channel, you have overlapping or interfering video, this will allow you to switch channels 1 through 8 on the drone, which is kind of cool. And the last switch over here is the speed switch. You can start out in less aggressive mode, and when you want to fly faster, you can go all the way up to the far towards you switch position right there, and you'll be flying super fast. Press again and hold, and that will turn off the transmitter. So now that you're familiar with everything about your new drone, let's go ahead and do some flying. We're going to do circuits first. We're also going to do a hover test to make sure everything checks out line of sight.
You really want to fly line of sight first before you goggle up and fly FPV for the first time. And that goes for any drone. Even if you build one later, it's always important to start it out facing you, with the back of the drone facing you, and take off in that hover position. And you're going to check all the orientations of the quadcopter before you goggle up and fly for the first time. I've had so many people make mistakes. You can fly off and hit something, an object, a person, or even yourself. So be super careful there. You want to make sure your props are on correctly. Look in the manual and do your reading before you start to fly. It's a super important tip for beginning. But let's go ahead and get started with some hovering, and then we'll do some first line of sight circuits. So now is the moment of truth. It's time to go ahead and fly your drone. Go ahead and put your landing pad down. Turn on your radio by pressing once, pressing again. Now we're going to take the drone battery itself, and from the back to the front, push that battery on, set it down as quickly as you can. Wait till the lights start flashing, stop flashing, come to solid, and now you're ready to arm. And again, to arm the drone, we take the A button here, which is the SA button, and it automatically starts. Now it's going to come up off the ground with something that we call optical flow on the very bottom. This drone has optical flow, so that's super nice. That means it's going to automatically stabilize over top of a textured surface and be completely stable and hold its position like it has GPS lock. I'll just give you an example of that. I'll bring it up off the ground and show you the hover. Almost kind of automatically takes off itself. And it's still going to drift in space, but very, very stable. Press down on the stick and hold, and then disarm. Okay, so now we're ready to fly for the first time, and we're going to go ahead and press the arm switch, and we're going to do a hover. So this is going to be how to hover with your drone. So you're going to come up slowly past half stick. The drone's going to automatically launch itself, and right now it's using optical flow to stabilize. So it does see the ground at this point. You may see it twitch a little bit. Very minimal stick movements are going to be the best, but you can almost see at this point, it has kind of a mode where it's flying itself. It has a lot of expo, and the first thing you want to do is practice staying over your landing pad. You just want to kind of get familiar with being able to come back near the landing pad, and this would be a nice solid hover. You're trying to maintain the position of the drone. Don't move left and right, forward and back too much. Keep your drone in one stable option. Try to keep it over the landing pad, and you can do this for about a whole battery. And this will teach you how to hover. So the first thing after learning how to keep it in one spot for a hover is learning how to fly left and right, forward and back. That's going to be super simple, and we're just going to press left on the right stick. It's going to go left. Now you're going to press on the right stick, and it's going to go right. We can pull back to bring it back to us, all the way back to about there, and stop. Now we're going to go forward. And you can practice flying across. So what we're going to do, our plus sign, is we're just going to bring the drone back and forward, all the way out, bring it back to center, go left, and you've done your first hover circuit. And this should complete a plus sign. And you can practice that over and over if you like to. Now we're going to practice our first landing. So what we're going to do is keep the stick about mid-stick right now. It has a nice hover at mid-stick. We're going to come down. Again, you're going to practice that hovering over top of your landing point. Your landing pad is right there. And now we're going to come all the way down on top of that H. Try to land in the center of the pad as you can. Just keep it over top of that H. There's a little bit of ground effect there when you come close to the ground, and press your disarm switch. And now you've done your first hover and your first hover circuit. So now that you've done your first hover circuit, it's time to do some flying circuits where we're going to have the drone facing you, and that will change everything as far as the orientation of the drone to the stick. So left is going to be left and right is going to be right. I'm going to show you how that works out. It's going to be a little bit complicated line of sight, but if you learn this first, I guarantee you'll be a better FPV pilot in the long run. Learn how to fly line of sight is super important. So go ahead again, and you're going to press the arm switch here. And your drone's going to start spinning with this air mode and come up and just bring the drone up. And you're going to do your hover first. So make sure you're doing your hover first over top of your home point. Practice that, keeping it nice and level over top of your home point in case you are coming in for a landing. And the first thing we're going to do is what we call a square circuit. So what we're going to do is start out in position number 1, which would be all the way over to the left-hand side. We're going to fly to position 2, 3, 4, and back to home, okay? So we're going to go ahead and fly from position 1 over to position 2. We're going to stop right there. Try to hold that position in a hover. You're going to fly over to position number 3 and hold it right there in that position. Hover, maintaining your spot. Now you're going to fly to position 4, and your square is almost complete, your first square circuit. And you're only using the right stick to do this. You can use a little bit of throttle, but you really don't need to. Now pull back on the stick. You're going to come back to your original position. So now you've completed your first square circuit. So now we're going to do it the opposite way. Using the right hand stick here, we're going to go forward. Position number 1, hold it. Position number 2, and do it a little bit faster this time. Position 3, position 4, and then back to the original position where you started. Now you've done a reverse square circuit. The next circuit that we can do is a little bit harder, but what we want to do first before we do that type of circuit is fly out, and we're going to use the left hand stick, and you're going to move it to the left, and you'll see the camera faces you. Now when you press right, the drone is going to go to the left. When you press left, it's going to go to the right. So everything is opposite. Press away from you on the right stick, and it comes toward you. Pressing toward you makes it go away from you. So this is called nose in flying in the RC heli world. And if you can learn how to fly that with a quadcopter, that's going to teach you a lot about orientation. So again, the yaw stick will spin the nose of the copter around. And I call it a copter because I used to fly RC helis back in the day, but it is a quadcopter and also known as a drone, FPV drone. So now we know how to use the yaw. We're going to come back and we're going to do our first circular circuit. And so this time we're going to use both sticks. We're going to fly the drone to the left using the left stick, point it that direction and push forward with the right stick. You're going to go all the way around in a circle. So that's your first circle circuit, flying around to the right. Now we're going to spin the drone around and we're going to do it the opposite way. And again, you can do a whole battery of circuits all the way around, nice and slow. Make sure it's nice and controlled. And if you want to speed up this process, again, you can press the speed button over here on the right-hand switch for this one towards you. Now it's going to fly a little bit faster in that circle. So as you progress, you can speed up your circuits. And again, come back to your starting position. And now you've done your first hover, square circuits, and circular circuits. Now you can come in for a landing, and you are all done with your line of sight flight tutorial and your circuits. Now we get to fly some FPV. Let's goggle up, put in a fresh battery, and get started. Now the Aquila 16 comes with a set of FPV goggles that are known as box goggles. These are probably the cheapest, most budget-friendly pair of goggles you can get in the FPV hobby. The next type of goggles that you can get is called the binocular style goggles. It has 2 separate lenses which allow you to see a little better if you have a need for glasses or you wear contacts. This will make it easier to fly if your vision's not as good. For nearsighted folks, the box goggles just don't work as good for me, and this one has a larger IPD adjustment and focal range adjustment on here for me to be able to see clearly what's going on inside the drone. But without further ado, let's go ahead and fire it up now. Let's do our first FPV test and tutorial with the Aquila 16. Let's go ahead and do some flying. So again, go ahead and press and hold again on your transmitter to turn it on. Once it turns on, you can grab your drone. You're going to press from the front to the back, or from the back to the front. Set it down on your landing pad as quickly as you can get it. Once it stops blinking, you should be connected. Now look inside your goggles. If you don't see it right away, you want to switch to the channel that you're on. And right now, I believe I'm on F2. Let's see, let me just scroll through all 8 channels here. And yes, I'm on Fat Shark 6. So now I'm good to go. I can start recording my video, press on this side, and now we're recording. So I'm gonna go ahead and take off in normal mode. All my switches are facing away. And remember, the left furthermost switch is the one you're gonna arm. So now we can go ahead, press that, take off our first FPV experience, come up nice and slow. And again, that optical flow is kind of seeing the ground and helping me have a more stable hover. So I'm just gonna fly forward here. Gonna try not to hit anything. And you really don't need a really large house to be able to fly this drone here. So now we're gonna come back in. We're just gonna fly out and back for the first time, okay? And disarm. So we're just gonna fly out, back, come back and land on your landing pad. And that's your first FPV flight. So you're practicing a little bit of different type of orientation. Now, once you're inside the goggles, left isn't right and right isn't left when you're coming back at yourself because you're sitting in the cockpit. And that makes it really a lot easier to fly. So let's go ahead and set up again and do our next flight in the FPV tutorial. Okay, so this time we're gonna explore a little bit further and some of the other flight modes. So go ahead and goggle up, make sure you're recording, hit your arm switch on the left-hand side and come up off the ground. And now we're just gonna go forward a little bit and we're gonna do some exploring. So I want you to fly forward at this point. Try not to hit anything, just keep going forward. We're gonna see how far out around the house we can get in here through the playroom. And this particular setup right here, it doesn't respond as much. There's a lot of exponential on the sticks, which means it softens up the sticks for you. So to fly a little bit faster, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna use this switch on the left to get into sport mode. And you can see it automatically goes a little bit faster. So a little tiny bit of stick movement is really gonna make a lot of difference. So you wanna make sure that you're using very minimal movement here. I mean, I'm talking very minimal, like hair-like movements on the throttle and the roll and the pitch side. And if you put your camera lower, you lower the camera on the drone, that'll also help it fly a little bit slower indoors. If you tilt it up, that's going to be a little bit faster. So if you want to fly faster, you can press a little faster on the stick and you can really get going in sport mode. So sport mode is going to take a little more practice. But wow, look at how fast it goes in that mode. You can really get ripping around the house. And that's what a lot of people want to learn to eventually do. So now we're going to go ahead and go into manual mode here. Hopefully I don't crash. Let's see if it'll let me do that. There we go. So now it has no stabilization. In indoors, you'll find that manual mode is a little harder to fly. Now this is kind of like the holy grail for most people, what we also call acro. And this will allow me to do flips and rolls, but unless you're really good, you're not going to be doing flips and rolls in the house. That's going to take a lot of practice, but it will, again, let you fly quite a bit faster. And if I bump into something, this particular drone doesn't flip to the ground, which I like. Just kind of bumps into things, and man, look at how much extra speed we have here. So let's go back into normal mode, and let's go ahead and come back into the kitchen and make our way back to the landing pad. Now, also we have that other switch on the right-hand side, which I showed you before. It's a speed one. So we went from slow to mid, which I guess is medium mode. And we also have fast. So even though I'm flying in stabilized mode and normal mode, it lets me fly a little bit faster. And that's going to teach you a lot as far as like learning your muscle memory on the sticks. Muscle memory is super important. So if you fly the simulator first before you do this, you'll be a much better pilot. Now, you can also go back to slow mode, and this is kind of fun. This is kind of like gap exploration. So you can find places to fly in your house that normally you wouldn't fly other drones. With this drone, it's pretty slow. So you can really go through spaces that almost seem impossible to fly through. I mean, look at that, right straight through the chandelier. Let's go back up again, see if we can do a different gap here. Oh, we did hit something, but again, this drone just kind of bumps and keeps flying, which is nice. Some other flight controllers will kind of go past their threshold, and once it does that, when it gets pushed too hard, it'll flip to the ground. This one doesn't do that, so it lets you really explore the gaps around the house. And that's just one of the funnest things about flying FPV, is flying through gaps. I mean, there's all kinds of things. You can create a course through your house and really have a lot of fun with FPV. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording there. I got 4 minutes out of that battery, so that's not too bad, just kind of ripping around the house. All right, guys, so at this point, you should be pretty experienced. You've done your first hover tests, you've done your first circuits, and now you've also done your first FPV flying around your house. And like I said before, like the Aquila 16, it really doesn't need a lot of space. If you have a pretty small house or apartment, you could still have a lot of fun indoors with this one. And since it's wintertime outside and everything is pretty much iced over and you have snow all the way up to your front door, it's a good time of year to fly an indoor drone. We also call these tiny whoops. You'll also find these, if you just type in indoor drone, you'll find different types of indoor drones out there. And if you want to see more tutorials on our channel, please do subscribe on the channel, because we have tons of tutorials, reviews, and you get to take a sneak peek at some of the new stuff that's coming out in 2024. We get a ton of new stuff in all the time, and we're one of the main channels in the drone industry and the FPV community. So check us out, please subscribe, and stay tuned for more updates. And again, check out the Aquila 16 in our link down below if you'd like to grab one of these as a beginner bundle, and then start out with the box goggles, upgrade to binocular style goggles. The Sky Zone 04Xs are probably some of the best FPV analog goggles out there. Later on, you can upgrade to HD flying, which is going to be something like the DJI 03 series from the FPV drones that they produce. Very nice, but much more expensive than flying analog FPV. And hey, some people say analog FPV is dead. Not yet, guys. It's still here, and it's affordable and accessible to everyone. So it's a lot of fun. Have some fun with me here on the channel. Again, please do subscribe. I'm Justin Davis, dedicated to the beginners in the FPV community. As always, take care, guys, and I will see you on the next one.